Which driver is going to come out on top in each team in 2025? This is going to be one of the most interesting facets of this year. We have had so many driver changes, lots of incoming rookies as well as existing drivers moving teams. There are a lot of super fascinating driver pairings that are just going to be really interesting to see how it plays out between the two of them within each team. We have the likes of Hamilton and Leclerc, we have some of the new kids on the block like Antonelli, and we have some existing drivers as well like Hülkenberg and Ocon that are moving teams and pairing against rookies as well. So there is a lot to talk about with all the driver pairings and a lot of things that could make for a very interesting season amongst the driver battles. So let's get into that. Hello everybody. My name is Michael, and welcome back to Last to First. I think right off the bat, we have to start with my most anticipated new driver pairing of the year, and that is Hamilton and Leclerc. You know, it is just, of course, the talk of the town now that we've seen Lewis Hamilton in Ferrari red and driving a Ferrari. It is just going to be so deeply interesting to see how it all plays out. And, you know, it's a brand new driver combination that we have not seen. Two of some of the best currently on the grid right now are going to be facing off, and it's going to be deeply, deeply interesting to see how it all plays out. Leclerc has the advantage of being the incumbent driver, and he's potentially the fastest driver over one lap in F1, but he's also evolved his racecraft and tire management to where it's not really a weakness that maybe I thought it was in the past. On the other side of the garage, we have the incoming Lewis Hamilton, who has the most pole positions and wins in F1 history, but in this ground effect era, he hasn't performed quite as well, particularly in qualifying and particularly in 2024. Even when he is less than his best, he was still incredibly close to Russell in qualifying, and I think Russell is one of the fastest drivers on the grid in qualifying, so that's no mean feat to be right there or thereabouts with him. Hamilton also has some of the best racecraft and race management that we've seen in F1. I feel kind of the general sentiment around the F1 community is that Leclerc is going to be faster in qualifying, but Hamilton will be faster in the race. But I don't think that's necessarily a foregone conclusion. The Monza one stop, the Monaco Masterclass, and a superb and controlled United States Grand Prix win show that Leclerc really has all the goods that he needs for the race as well as qualifying. More than just outright ability, I think the fact that Leclerc is the incumbent driver is certainly going to be a deciding factor between the two drivers. No matter how good any particular driver is, it's going to take time to adapt to a new car, new engine, new engineers, just new everything. It's going to be vastly different for Hamilton, who has spent his entire career with Mercedes in one form or another, as well as McLaren. So it's going to be completely new to him. Leclerc, of course, already has all of the rapport developed. He has the relationships, the comfort, and the backing at Ferrari, while Hamilton hasn't developed those relationships yet like he has had at Mercedes. Hamilton knew exactly how to get what he needed out of the team, and that takes a lot of time of working together to get to that point. I think generally over the course of the season, we will see Leclerc having an advantage in qualifying. I think we'll see Leclerc have an advantage in the race as well for a good chunk of the year, but I can imagine us starting to see Hamilton taking a bit more of a fight to Leclerc come mid-season and on once he starts to get a bit more comfortable with the team and the car. It's going to take a bit of time for Hamilton to adapt, and because of that, I think Leclerc is going to come out on top of this teammate battle in 2025. One of the few driver pairings to actually stay the same from 2024 to 2025 is, of course, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, and that is a deeply fascinating driver pairing there in and of itself. 2024 really saw some different momentum shifts between the two drivers. Of course, generally Norris had the upper hand, particularly at the beginning of the season. Norris was definitely stronger, but then towards the middle and late end of the season, Piastri really started to push Norris, and it was looking like Piastri was maybe the one to back for the rest of the season. But by the end of the season, Norris took back control, and he wound up with 9 poles to Piastri's 0, and had a average qualifying gap of 0.171 in favor of Norris. Piastri really needed to make gains in his second season against Norris, and he did in qualifying, and he was super aggressive and just his overall racecraft. but we saw Norris bring it to another level, and we saw Piastri go missing at times. Piastri is still learning a bit with the tires. He did improve from his rookie year, but he is still getting more of a grasp on the tires. So I really want to see him make that step this year. A question that I have in my mind about Piastri is, were the challenges that he faced the typical sophomore slump that we see in F1 drivers, or did Norris just show that he has the higher ceiling? Piastri is really going to have to make another big step in qualifying, in that tire wear, and his consistency across the season in order to really challenge Norris and to show that he does in fact belong there with Norris. After having a sniff of a title fight, Norris I think is going to be at an even higher level than ever before, and he's going to be a really formidable opponent in the coming year. His sheer speed was very evident last year, and we started to see towards the end of the season that he won't tolerate being pushed around all the time. McLaren and Norris will certainly have reasonable expectations going into the season that they can fight for the title, so Norris is going to be ready to be on it immediately and ready to be fighting for that title. I think mentally Norris kind of had the edge last year because he knew he would generally be ahead of Piastri, and generally he would have favoritism over Piastri because he was in half a title fight. Starting out in the year though, they're going to be on equal ground, and Piastri will be focused on making sure that he doesn't allow for a similar fate. Also, I think McLaren is going to have to learn how to properly juggle these two drivers because some of the decisions last year were a little questionable regarding the two, so I think they're going to be trying to give both of the drivers equal ground. I think Piastri can make the jump that he needs. He does seem like a very top tier talent, of course, but it's really hard to bet against Norris going into this year. It just feels like Norris is closer to peaking than Piastri is at the moment, and because of that I think Norris is going to come out on top of the teammate battle. I think, and I hope it will be even closer between these two this year though. The next driver pairing that I want to talk about is Russell and Antonelli. This has the potential to be one of the most exciting driver lineups in F1. If Antonelli is as good as people believe, then he's going to give Russell a proper run for his money at some point in the season. I have a feeling that it's going to be a tough transition for Antonelli though, and it's going to take a good portion of the season before he's really feeling comfortable with the car. Given he is such a young rookie, I think there's likely to be a lot of mistakes and crashes alongside some probably really brilliant moments. Oddly enough, I think it would actually be beneficial for Antonelli if Mercedes isn't super competitive at the front of the field, because the pressure will just be a bit less. There's already enough pressure on Antonelli going into the season that anything added on that, like a title fighting car, might be a bit too much, and it'll be just a lot of extra pressure onto him. It'll be really important for Antonelli to just have a calm and uneventful weekend in Australia for the season opener. He just needs a good, solid, and steady result to keep a lot of questions at bay from the media. If he immediately crashes or has a ton of mistakes, things could really start to spiral for him immediately, and that would be challenging for him. On the other side of the garage, I don't think there's necessarily zero pressure on Russell though either. He needs to maintain the team leader position and keep Antonelli at arm's length. With how much hype there is behind Antonelli, Russell could have the team taken from him in the future if Antonelli starts to thrash him down the line. I don't think that's necessarily likely anytime soon, but it's certainly a real possibility down the line. Russell is very established at Mercedes. He's now the team leader. He's an incredibly quick qualifier, and his race pace has only been increasing in recent times. So it's going to be very difficult for Antonelli to be beating Russell. All of this could be thrown immediately on its head if Antonelli is really as good as people say. If he is the next Verstappen level of a driver, then he's going to rock up at Mercedes and start beating Russell at least some of the time on several occasions. Regardless though, I do fully anticipate Russell to come out on top by the end of the season. I think people forget how good Russell actually is, and it's going to be an incredibly tall order for Antonelli to beat him in his rookie season in F1. So I think Russell will be able to bring it home. Moving on to a maybe less interesting teammate battle is Verstappen and Lawson. I think this probably has got to be the most clear of the driver battles next to Alonso and Stroll. Really, regardless of how well Lawson does, there's almost a 0% chance Lawson is at Verstappen's level and could beat him in a season. If that were to happen, that would be one of the biggest shocks in F1 history, I would say. But, going into it a little more, Verstappen, of course, has incumbency. He has absolutely outrageous speed and racecraft, and he has a ruthlessness that might be unmatched in F1 history, and he will certainly have the team 100% backing him. Everything points to Verstappen absolutely dominating Lawson, as he has done with just about every teammate before him. I think the only thing that could unsettle Verstappen a bit is that he has a child on the way, and there's a lot of lingering Red Bull tension that is likely to rise this year, along with tons and tons of rumors of him potentially going to Aston or moving teams or just being done with Formula One in general. These are all things that could potentially have an impact on Verstappen. However, I can't imagine any of that being enough to topple Verstappen, but it might make him just a bit uneasy throughout the season. The real question is not whether Lawson can beat Verstappen, it is just if Lawson can get beat less than Perez, Gasly, and Albon managed to. Next on my not in order list of driver battles is going to be Ocon and Bearman. The Ocon and Bearman lineup is a quietly great lineup and one that I am quite intrigued to see. Esteban Ocon is of course a race winner, and he's proven to be a very quick driver. Sometimes his aggressiveness doesn't quite pay off though, and it has caused him trouble in his F1 career, but he is still a very capable Grand Prix driver. We know that Ocon isn't amongst maybe the top tier of the best, but he's shown to be a driver who is deserving of the multi-year F1 career that he's had. The good thing for Bearman is that Ocon is still a very beatable driver. Ocon is a really great benchmark for the season for Bearman. If Bearman is able to stick with Ocon or even narrowly beat him, then we know we have a very respectable driver on our hands. If Bearman manages to crush Ocon, then we know we really have a superstar on our hands. And if Bearman loses to Ocon, then Ocon is just good enough where we can toss it up to him being a rookie for the reason that Bearman lost. Now, while he is a rookie, the playing field is kind of decently level just because he has had 3 Grand Prix starts and Ocon is moving to a new team. Of course, the advantage is certainly in Ocon's court, but the fact that they're both going into a new team will certainly have an impact as well. Both drivers will be getting used to a lot of new ways of working. Overall, though, I am expecting Ocon to beat Bearman. I think Ocon is fast enough to keep Bearman at arm's length in his rookie season, and I think Ocon's experience will just aid him across the season when the going gets tough. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much. Please give the video a like and a subscribe if you're interested. We are quickly approaching 100 subscribers, which is a really exciting milestone for me. So thank you all for tuning in as much as you do, and let's get into the rest of the video. Next, we move into a less than interesting driver pairing, and that is Alonso and Stroll. Like with Verstappen and Lawson, this is likely to be a very one-sided battle. Alonso is, of course, one of the greatest in the sport, and Stroll is just an okay Grand Prix driver. Alonso might not be in his prime anymore, but he's still one of the most strategic and intellectual drivers, and he uses all of that to his advantage to still be very capable in Formula One. Stroll has shown a great deal of skill in the wet, and on his day, Stroll has been able to legitimately beat Alonso on a couple of occasions, but these are pretty far and few between, and over the course of a season, Alonso is by far the most capable driver. Unless Alonso suddenly hits the wall of age, then I think the past is likely to continue. Stroll has been particularly unimpressive as of late, of course, and looks less and less like he wants to be there. When the car is bad like it was in 2024, and like I think it probably will be in 2025, then his motivation really takes a turn for the worse, and Alonso will only continue to destroy him. I think generally this battle probably won't be talked about too much this year because Stroll's poor performance doesn't matter too much when the car isn't that good, and I think generally people know that Alonso is going to come on top. But the moment that Aston Martin does ever build a good car again, questions will only be increased about Stroll, and it's really hard to view the outcome of this driver pairing battle being anything less than a lopsided victory in favor of Alonso. Next up, we move on to a very spicy driver battle, and that is Sainz and Albon. Next to Hamilton and Leclerc, this might be my most anticipated teammate battle of the year. This is going to be such a fascinating battle where both drivers are really going to be fighting for supremacy, and I think it's possible either one of them could reign supreme. These past years at Ferrari for Sainz have really cemented how highly I rate Sainz, and if anything, I see that rating increasing during his time at Williams. On the other side of the garage, Albon has really reinvented himself at Williams after a disastrous Red Bull stint, but his competition hasn't been particularly high until sometimes that we saw with Colapinto. Once Colapinto really stormed onto the scene, we saw some falters in Albon's racecraft and overall weekends. So was that down to just some of Williams' struggles throughout the year, or was Albon feeling a bit more pressure for the first time in a while? That's something we'll certainly find out this year. I think we have a really great idea of how good Sainz is, but we're still really unsure how good Albon is in his post-Red Bull career, and that's what makes this driver pairing so fascinating. Albon, of course, has incumbency and is generally running high after these seasons with Williams. I feel that, though, with Sainz, there's going to be less of a transitioning period at Williams than it will be for like Hamilton at Ferrari. Sainz really understands the technical side a great deal, and he's going from a larger team to a smaller team. Sainz was also able to run in the postseason tests with Williams in Abu Dhabi, so that will have allowed him to get used to Williams' trackside operations, as well as a more recent car rather than a couple years old car. When we look at the driver pairing that Williams has, it's crazy to think that they have managed to pick up two drivers like this. The positions that they've been fighting for in the championship really doesn't deserve these two drivers, but it just goes to show the trajectory that Williams is on, and it's a positive one, and that people clearly have a great deal of faith in James Vowles. For me, it can kind of feel easy to write off Albon because I do rate Sainz so highly, but I don't think we can write him off by any means. It's tough for me to believe that he is going to beat Sainz over the course of the season, even though he has been at Williams for a few seasons and has looked incredibly good. But I think Sainz is just going to get on top of the car and the team quite quickly, and I think he's going to be able to start beating Albon early on. I don't think it's going to be a lopsided battle, but I think Sainz will come out on top because I think he is just a very incredible driver and he's going to get the most out of that Williams car. Next up, we move on to Tsunoda and Hadjar, and this is actually a pretty interesting driver battle to me. Somehow, Tsunoda once again finds himself being snubbed of the Red Bull seat, and he's facing off against another Red Bull Junior. Despite making some really solid improvements last year on top of his already confirmed speed, Red Bull still decided against him. Tsunoda is kind of once again in a lose-lose situation, just like he was when he was facing off against Daniel Ricciardo. If he ends up beating Hadjar, then that's to be expected, given that Hadjar is a rookie. If he loses to Hadjar, then his reputation likely takes a turn for the worse. I can't imagine there's really any way for Yuki Tsunoda into the main Red Bull team at this point, so this year is going to be really about him performing at his best to possibly be on some other teams' radars. Hadjar is coming into the team seemingly on the back foot because he didn't really appear to be Red Bull's first option for a driver to fill the seat. They haven't been super impressed by him, and they really weren't super keen to get him an F1 seat right away. He's similar to Yuki in that he has good potential raw speed, but he is a bit of an emotional character, which probably turned Red Bull off to him, since that's a big reason why Yuki hasn't got the Red Bull seat. However, Hadjar really has a great opportunity to surprise a ton of people. If he can rock up to RB and show a lot of maturity and show a good turn of speed, then that could put him on the paddock's radar more. It'll be a tall order for him to beat Yuki, since Yuki is a pretty experienced driver at this point, but if he is able to show up against him, then that'll be really positive for him. It also helps that there's not a ton of drivers immediately ready to replace him. Yes, Arvid Lindblad is on the outskirts of things, but it would be still quite early for him to rock up and go to RB, but anything is possible with the Red Bull situation there. Now, while it would be a super interesting story for the year for Hadjar to beat Tsunoda, I think Yuki is going to convincingly come out on top of this teammate battle. I think Yuki is just too quick, too experienced, too embedded in the team, and too determined to prove people wrong that I think he's just going to be a challenge that Hadjar won't be able to surpass. For my penultimate driver pairing battle, let's take a look at Gasly and Doohan for as long as that lasts. Like Hadjar, Doohan has the opportunity to really surprise people, prove them wrong, and put Alpine in a really interesting position. Most people are already writing Doohan off due to the signing of Colapinto, and it could make for a great story if Doohan is able to show up and be there or thereabouts with Gasly. It'll certainly be a tall order for him though, because Gasly is another driver who isn't at the top tier of drivers, but he's a proven Grand Prix driver and a race winner of course as well. He also managed to snatch Alpine from the hands of Ocon, who had been with that team for several years. Gasly is, like Ocon, going to be a great benchmark for Doohan because of these reasons. Gasly isn't quite in the lose-lose situation that Yuki is, because his future is a bit more secure, I would say, but he is still expected to beat Doohan, and if he doesn't, then that doesn't look particularly good for him. But even if Doohan does prove to be a good enough driver to retain his seat for the season, I do think Gasly is going to come out on top of this driver battle. Gasly is established in a team now and is a good enough driver to beat a lot of the drivers on the grid. Even if Doohan does prove to be at least good enough to retain his seat for the season, I still think Gasly is going to come out on top. I'm going to guess that the pressure will probably be a bit too much for Doohan, and that's probably going to lead to his unfortunate downfall. So overall, I think Gasly will come out on top. Last but not least, we have to talk about Hülkenberg and Bortoleto, and this is another really great driver pairing for the year that I'm excited to see how it plays out. Hülkenberg and Bortoleto, I think, is extremely similar to the Ocon and Bearman lineup, but I think Bearman is probably a bit more highly rated in general than Bortoleto is. Like Ocon, Hülkenberg is a proven Grand Prix driver. He is consistently quick, and he is really a midfield points machine. He will deliver more weekends than not, and he will be an excellent asset for Sauber and a great challenge for Bortoleto as well. I think we're all a bit unsure of Bortoleto's true potential and true ceiling, so that makes it a bit tough to know how he's going to do against Hülkenberg and if he's going to have a shot at beating him, but it will be very interesting to see. I mean, he's coming off back-to-back F3 and F2 title wins in his rookie season, so he must have something there to be curious about. Sauber is really going to be a tough environment though for him to go into as a rookie. They aren't quite as sharp as bigger teams like a McLaren, and not even sharp as Haas seems to be these days now. It's really going to be tough for Bortoleto to thrive in an environment that isn't fully up to F1 standards. They're still kind of rebuilding as they become Audi next year. It can be easy for an ailing team like Sauber to blame the drivers, and blaming a driver early in their career could lead to them not having a long-term future. I think though at least Sauber/Audi believes in Bortoleto, since they did fight to get him out of the McLaren contract, so hopefully that will give Bortoleto some extra time to show what he can do, and hopefully Bortoleto's management would have been able to secure a pretty good contract or a multi-year contract for him as well. Overall though, I think similar to Ocon and Bearman, Hülkenberg is going to come out on top because of his experience and consistency, but it could be a really fascinating driver battle for the year. So those are my thoughts on F1 2025's driver pairing battles up and down the grid. Let me know what you guys think down below, who you think is going to come out on top. Will there be some surprises of the season, or am I kind of spot on with some of the things that I'm saying? We'll find out over the course of this season. If you guys are interested, give me a follow on social media. I'm on X as LastToFirstReal, first spelled F1RST. Also on Instagram as LastToFirst, of course first spelled F1RST. So thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next one.